Okay, so Hurricane Beryl just barreled through Houston, Texas, did some damage here, did some damage in some other places throughout Texas, and you got to treat it with damage. What do you do? I wanted to talk to you about a couple of different things. We'll categorize it by two different types, young trees and old mature trees. And so let's get right into it. First thing, I'm Matt Latham, board certified master arborist. Thanks so much for being here and watching. I hope you made it through Hurricane Beryl all right. And it looks like Florida is the next to maybe have some things coming your way. So feel free to reach out if you need help with your trees. We're not in Florida, but I can at least guide you in the right direction. It's arboristondemand.org. And let's get right into it. So young trees, small trees are very, very, very resilient. The smaller, the better, if you ask me. If I had my choice, I'd plant saplings for every tree we plant because they just take to their environment so much better. 15-gallon or less is perfect. And if you do it right and plant it according to ANSI A300 standards, they're going to get easily to that 6,500-gallon, 200-gallon tree size within a couple of 3 years. They do really, really well in their new environment. Older trees are already established and tend to have some more difficulty. But let's say you got a younger tree and it blew over in Hurricane Beryl. Now, if it's been planted within the past maybe 2 years, chances are you can upright it back up again and you should have no problem whatsoever. Give your trees a good root stimulant. Seaweed is a perfect thing. Fish emulsion and extract are very good. Rock phosphates are gonna add a lot of good phosphates that'll help with the root development, things like that. Number one thing though, make sure you've got good root aeration. If you've got a soil penetrometer like me, I'm a big old nerd. I don't know any other arborist that carries around except one. He's a cool guy. But if you've got a soil that has 150 psi or more, chances are your roots aren't getting enough oxygen, so they're going to stay right up there near the surface. When you've got a deeper penetration of those high pressure weather systems that push that air into the ground, your roots are going to be able to breathe a lot easier. They're going to go deeper and develop better. And by the way, every micro and macronutrient, just about, has to bind to oxygen before it's even available to the tree. So having that oxygen in your soil is so critical. One cool thing that you can do to increase the oxygen levels in your soil, you can actually add compost just right on the top layer. Just sprinkle it on the grass. The grass will grow right through it, and that's going to sift through the soil levels over time. And if you do this annually for a year or 2 or 3, that's going to start to build up, and you're going to have a really, really good, healthy organic matter that'll feed the microbes, feed the trees, feed the grass even, and you're going to have a really beautiful lawn. I like a brand called MicroLife. MicroLife is made right here in Houston. They're my absolute favorite. If you go online, you can order it on Amazon. There's a few companies out there that sell it, or you can find it locally if you're here in the Houston area. Really good stuff. That, again, is going to add some beneficial microbes and feed the ones that are already there. And it's going to help to chemically flocculate the soil. That's going to open it up, allow oxygen down into the root system. This is so critical. So if you've got a new tree, go ahead and prop it back up. Go ahead and stake it. Now, normally, if you know me, you know I don't like staking trees, but you just had some root damage and your tree is going to need a little bit of support. Start to wean that off over time, over 2 or 3 years. You want to wean it off of that. It's like, somebody made the example, it's like putting a kid in a wheelchair and then asking them to run a marathon. That's just not going to happen. When you stake a tree, it actually weakens it and stunts it because the tree relies on that support system as opposed to developing a strong support system on its own. In the forest, they don't do that. They just get strong. That's how it works. So try to keep it away from staking a tree. But if you had one that blew over, go ahead and prop it back up. Add some support stakes or some guy wires on the opposite side. That'll help to redevelop the root system and get it reestablished. By the way, if you leave it as is and you don't have roots exposed, chances are you're actually okay. It doesn't matter because the tree will actually just start to regrow, and you might have the canopy kind of look like this where it's growing sideways and then it recorrects itself to grow. We call it geotropism. That downward pull of gravity causes the tree to grow up. It's also looking for sunlight. That's what we call that phototropism. So young trees, not a big deal. Prop it back up, give it some good fish emulsion, some good seaweed extract, maybe some good humic acid, add a little compost to it, and watch that tree blossom over time. Larger trees. Now, if you've got a larger tree, and it was like this, and now it's like this, you got to get rid of it. Now, there's a few special cases where the roots were not damaged. We're going in as professionals, and we're re-staking them, re-guiding them up in the air, and that's okay. But we're carefully monitoring every single 3 months. Every quarter, we're coming in and checking up on them, doing a soil test to make sure the soil is in good condition, checking the roots to make sure no further breakage has occurred. That's okay for us. Do not do that on your own. If you've got a tree that's big and mature and it started leaning, that means that it is in the process of falling, and whatever's under it is bound to get crushed. I actually just was called by one of the news stations local, and they asked me to do a piece on that. They said, what do you do if the tree starts leaning? I said, get out of the way. Get the tree down if you can, ASAP, because that tree is falling. Now, again, we can do some special things. Do not try it on your own. But if you've got a tree that's leaning where it wasn't leaning before, especially if you see some roots upheaving on the back side or some cracking in the soil, you can actually stick an air screwdriver down there and check for air pockets as well. That is a sure sign that your tree is falling, and you've got an extremely hazardous scenario. Get out of the way. However, if the tree is not leaning and you've got a few minor broken limbs up in the top, here's what you need to do. Obviously, you got to get the hazards out of the way. Don't walk under them. Call your arborist or a professional to come in and take care of it. But you can often remove those dead limbs back to a good parent attachment trunk or limb. So let's say you've got a branch coming off of here and it breaks right here. Well, you can cut that back to the trunk. Not a flush cut. You want to follow ANSI A300 standards and ISA best management practices. However, you can actually top it if it's further out. Now, this is a very controversial topic, so I know I'm going to get some flack on this. However, there's a lot of good research that says sometimes it's best to just cut it. Let's say you've got a limb here, it tore here. Just cut it back beyond the tear mark, and you're going to re-sprout those, and you can train those over time to be permanent branching structures. If you've got a tree that has lost more than 50% of its canopy, you might have an issue. And what I mean by that is each leaf is, I call it a food factory for the tree. Each leaf is collecting sunlight, using that energy to convert carbon dioxide and water and this is the very oversimplified version, of course. But essentially to create sugar, starches, things like that. These are the basic building blocks of a tree. If I were to cut any tree in America down or any tree in the world down, it's going to have around and dissect it, dry it out, and then figure out what is it made of. It's going to be about 47% carbon, about 43% oxygen, and about 4% hydrogen. Now, if you're good with math, that's 94% of the tree is carbon, hydrogen, oxygen. And if you know a little simple math or a little simple organic chemistry, C6H12O6, that is sugar. And so sugar is your best friend. Your leaves make it in droves, and you've got millions of leaves on a mature tree. Each one of these is going to town. Now, if you've had a few years prior to when the storm hit where the tree wasn't doing well, you might be better off removing the tree, because all of those years, the tree is not able to make as much energy as it's using, and that's why it's going into decline. When you have years like drought years or years where you've got flooding or freezing or just really, really dry and hot, where you've got other storm events that cause damage in your tree, it's a really good idea to have your certified arborist come out and take a look at it to determine, is it a good idea to try to preserve this tree? I love taking a tree from the grave that has been struggling and dying, putting some molasses into it, pumping some humates into the soil, opening up the soil, and oftentimes we can get really, really, really good results very quickly. But it's hard, and it takes a lot of time, energy, and quite frankly, money. I don't go to work for free, and I hope you don't either. And so if you've got a mature tree, 50% is kind of that's my threshold. If you've lost 50% of the canopy, or more, it might be time to remove the tree and replant. If you've lost 50% or less, there's usually a really good chance that if you've already had a tree that's healthy and thriving, that you're going to be able to restore it no problem. And that does take years and years and years to do. However, I promise it's worth it when you got everybody telling you your tree's screwed, you got to get rid of it, and you come back to them 5 years later with just the most beautiful tree in the neighborhood. So, hey, thanks so much for watching. I hope you learned a little bit. This is kind of a longer form version of these videos. If you like these, go ahead and like it. Comment down below if you got questions. Hit us up on the web at arboristondemand.org. If you'd like us to take a look at your trees, we can do this remotely via some really cool technology out there, and we can usually give you a really, really good determination of what to do in your unique circumstance. And hit that subscribe button and the bell notification for more great tree tips. And thanks so much for watching. Bye now.